I'm really, really pleased to be able to be joined by Sarah Schwartz, who is a human rights lawyer in Australia and the executive officer of the Jewish Council of Australia, which is an organization that I've had the good fortune to get to know a little bit from when I was visiting Australia earlier this year, and got to know Sarah a little bit, which was really a great privilege. And she's joining us at 6 a.m. in the morning, Melbourne time. So I'm uh, given that, and given what a traumatic and horrifying week it's been for people in Australia, and particularly for Australian Jews. I'm really glad you could do this, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me, Peter.
So before we talk about the massacre that occurred on Sunday, maybe you could just give folks a little bit of a background by talking about the kind of the nature of the Jewish community in Australia, its history, its demography, its characteristics, what makes it different from other diaspora Jewish communities?
Yeah, I've been asked that a couple of times and been like reflecting on it because someone was asking me questions yesterday, like, oh, apparently the Jewish community in Sydney has its own um, like ambulance service and healthcare service, and like, does this mean that you don't trust the ambulance or healthcare services? And it made me think a lot about actually one of the amazing things about the Australian Jewish community and the Jewish community that I grew up in is just that it's so tight knit. And I was trying to explain to this person from overseas that I don't think it's because there's no trust in like Australia's great healthcare system, but it's because there is and has been, yeah, a culture of like communal giving and reciprocity in Australia. And I think yeah, I mean, in terms of Sydney, like there are two sort of predominant Jewish communities. I grew up in one of them, and one of them is the eastern suburbs, and there's a lot of crossover and people move in between. The eastern suburbs is where Bondi is located. Um, so the Jewish community and the Jewish community in Melbourne, where I live now, has the largest population of Holocaust survivors outside of Israel. Um, were a number of Jewish people who moved here after World War II, but there were also Jewish people who moved here earlier from Eastern Europe. And I think the community that was impacted the most in that Bondi community and the Bondi Chabad is made up of a lot of Eastern Europe Jews who moved from Russia and other Eastern European countries. Um, so I guess all that to say is that, like, in terms of the makeup of Australia's Jewish community, as I said, we're quite small, tight knit. I think over the years, the community, like politically, has become more and more conservative. It used to be quite a sort of, yeah, a more left-wing radical community. Um, my colleague Max Kaiser has written about this, and I think has shifted over many years, at least in terms of communal leadership, to being a bit more conservative in terms of its politics, and probably religiously as well. We don't have we don't have very many conservative or reform synagogues. We're predominantly Orthodox synagogues, but not a particularly religious community as well. So there's a whole bunch of uh, little idiosyncrasies, but yeah, very very tight knit. Lots of people go to Jewish day schools like myself, and lots of people are very interconnected with Jewish communal institutions. And so I think it's fair to say that in the wake of what has happened, most Jewish people know someone who was there or impacted.
Um, and I want to talk about the event, obviously, but we do have a question right off. What do you think explains this shift to the right in the Australian Jewish community?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would normally defer to Max, my colleague, who's a historian, but um, I think like probably the US Israel has a lot to do with that. Um, the you know the organization that I started, the Jewish Council, has historical resonances with another Jewish organization that existed in the 40s and 50s, which was a non-Zionist organization that very much engaged in solidarity work with other racialized communities, engaged in really active anti-fascist work, and had a lot of popular support amongst the Jewish community. And I think like we saw like in the US after the Six-Day War, in particular, a real shift in Jewish communal leadership. And that has only shifted further and further to the right over many years. Like, even in my lifetime, there's been a number of right-wing coups of our Jewish communal organizations. I mean, I want to preface that by saying that even though politically our institutions are incredibly right wing and in this moment have sort of in our last election, for example, like lobbied for sometimes far right parties or our version of Trump, Timu Trump, I think he's referred to as the membership and the base of the Jewish community is not necessarily that way. And I mean, that was also kind of made clear in the election, even though the Jewish community threatened that, all of these politicians would lose their seats because of the Jewish vote in those electorates, they didn't. And so the Jewish community didn't necessarily vote in line with the mainstream Jewish organizations. So I think that that has to be said. But but still progressively our institutions have really sided with, I think, sided with Israel down the hill that it's gone down and felt compelled to sort of move along those lines. And that has probably a lot to do with like Jewish communal structures and probably the anti-democratic nature of those structures. Maybe much similar to the US in the way that they've aligned themselves to state power in so many ways. But yeah, I think that that explains some of the shifts, but also but in this moment, I think similar to the US, we're seeing all these new fractures and all this new political movement within the Jewish community, and we've definitely just continued to experience that at the Jewish Council.
Hmm. I mean, the discrepancy between a Jewish organizational establishment, which is further to the right in the population, I think fits with the US. I did get the sense from my time in Australia that one difference is that if I'm correct, a larger percentage of students go to Jewish day schools, which I think if, that has an impact on people's political views and on the way they think about Israel. I'm just curious, again, before we get to the events that happened on Sunday, what do you attribute the fact that Jewish day school attendance is higher in Australia?
Yeah, that's really, I mean, I went to a Jewish day school. I actually have in this moment connected with a lot of people that I went to school with and had the experience of going and meeting with a significant portion of my grade at school, like with the board of the school to tell them that they did not teach us Israel's history. And they didn't tell us, my Jewish education, and this is the way we described it, it was a political education. We never got taught facts or history. We got taught the love of Israel. And a lot of us go on March of the Living. I don't know if that's like an
Yeah,
organized, yeah.
sure.
So a lot of us go on March of the Living. So that's like you're 16 years old. You've got all this connection to the Holocaust because there's all these Holocaust survivors in our community. And you're immediately, as a 16-year-old, you go to concentration camps, have this sort of life transformative experience, and then go to Israel. And that was my first experience of going to Israel. And I think that's a lot of Jewish people's first experience of going to Israel. Um, so I think that that has a large part to play. And the fact that, yes, if you're going to a Jewish day school or if you're connecting with Jewish institutions, then the only way to do so is through Israel and is through that connection to Israel. So I think that, yeah, the day schools probably have a large role to play in terms of their education, and then the way that people sort of continue to stay tight-knit through the community and through connections with synagogues as well after they exit Jewish day schools. But yeah, I mean, as I said, in my year in my Jewish day school, it was a tiny school. There were like 50 or 60 of us, and there were like 10 of us at least from our grade who are meeting with the school. So I guess that goes to show that there is still a significant portion of people who are changing their views. I think one difference which may be a bit which we've noticed at the Jewish Council is that I think there's definitely an older Jewish community who is connected more to that sort of Marxist, communist Jewish tradition that sort of existed more at the time, like people who were connected to the original Jewish Council and sort of that legacy of Holocaust survivors. And we have really, the younger Jewish population in some ways has become a lot more right wing in this moment because they felt like their connection to Jewishness has to come through these Jewish institutions. and the Jewish institutions are telling them to be afraid when they go onto university campuses. And like that was my, like I'm sure a lot of people here had that experience too, but like I very distinctly remember being terrified going to university my first day because I was told that people are going to be handing me flyers on Palestine. It's because they hate Jewish people. And like, I guess it's because I interacted with a bunch of other left-wing, movements and Jewish people. I was like, wait a second, these people don't seem like they actually hate Jewish people that much. Let me like interrogate what they think. But that like sets the scene. And I can only imagine what people in this moment where you're not really given the chance to have those debates on campus because it's all so insanely politicized and like there's a genocide taking place. I can't imagine what it's like for those younger students. And so I think a lot of them are going further to the right in Australia.